Good evening, this is Ajahn John. Tonight we are going to be talking about how to end religious violence. First of all, you're going to listen to a discussion from a BBC radio programme. This is from BBC Radio 3 if you are interested. And you will hear a talk with Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, S-A-C-K-S. Rabbi, if you don't know, is the word we use to address a Jewish priest. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks has just written a book analysing the causes of religious violence in the modern world and suggesting solutions to it. So listen to the BBC programme first. This will last for about 5.5 minutes. Then I'm going to summarise the main points and discuss them in detail. Don't worry if you cannot understand everything. They may sometimes speak unclearly or too quickly, but I will explain everything in detail later. Okay, let's listen to the BBC.
It'd be hard to disagree with Rabbi Jonathan Sacks that religion is back with a vengeance. Its return is upsetting those who thought the road to the future was secular. But whether it's Christianity, Judaism or Islam, it's the extreme versions of these religions that seem to be moving to the centre of our world. In his new book, Not in God's Name, Confronting Religious Violence, Jonathan Sacks explores the roots of violence and its relationship to religion, excoriating contemporary secularism, excavating the theological roots of the antagonisms between the three great Abrahamic faiths, arguing that anti-Semitism is a sign of a collapsing moral culture. These are just a few of the subjects of a book whose raison d'etre is to say, these extreme versions of religion will inherit the earth if we don't reimagine the relationship of the faiths one to the other. Why is religion on the rise? I asked him when we met earlier.
Well, you know, being in Radio 3 takes me back down memory lane to 1990 when they did the Wreath Lectures under the heading The Persistence of Faith. And at that time, the argument was as out of the box as you could get. Don't forget, 1989, Berlin Wall fell, Cold War ended, and Francis Fukuyama, that great thinker, said, it's the end of history. Somehow or other, the age of ideology has gone, the age of faith has gone, and liberal democracy and the market economy would conquer the world. Now, I knew at the time that that was wrong. At the very moment that that was happening, 1989, books were being burned in Bradford for the first time in a very long time indeed. Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa against Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, and no Jew can ever forget the words of Heinrich Heine back in the 1840s, that when they begin by burning books, they end by burning people. So what I suddenly realized was that Europe had become secularized, but they thought that's the only way the rest of the world can go. And they were quite wrong.
But what's interesting is your summary of what was happening then is right, but we're 15 years on, 25 years on. What has changed in that period? Because the persistence of religion was a kind of defence of religion. It's much more difficult religion now for reasons that you outline in the book.
Yes, I was going to say then, I held back because I thought it was just too controversial, that the religion that might return was not the religion of the still small voice. It was going to be the religion of the fire, the earthquake, and the whirlwind.
What led you to have that view?
Because I had been tracking the growth of madrasas, especially in Pakistan, And I'd been seeing what had been hitherto a very marginal strand of Islam suddenly become, i.e. Wahhabi Islam, become enormously influential on a young generation. And I've always taken the view that don't think of what's going to happen tomorrow. Think of what's going to happen 25 years down the road. And I think that's the role of the intellectual throughout the ages. And I could just see what was going to happen. I could also see, and let's not confine this to Islam, I could also see a great number of the world's religions, and it applied to Judaism in the Middle East, it applied to Christianity in some parts of the Bible Belt in America. I could see that religion was getting more and more restless as it felt that society was going more and more in the wrong direction. And there's a moment, a tipping point, where accommodation fails and resistance begins.
And you think it's religion that's become resistant?
Absolutely. It is a counter-modern religiosity that's prevailing.
And that is partly, according to your book, because the secular models on offer simply can't offer us a thick enough sense of who we are, where we belong.
Yeah, and it's interesting that pretty much the same time as my book has come out, a book has come out by a secular Jewish writer, Michael Walzer of Princeton, in which he traces this process in many other parts of the world, like India and Algeria, secular nationalisms that arose after the Second World War have generated a religious counter-reaction. And
in that sense, to use Freud's term, religion is the return of the repressed.
Yeah, and I actually argue in the book that Freud had his own repressed, which has returned, because Freud was very alive to the significance, actually in his own life, of sibling rivalry. He resented his younger brother, and his younger brother died before he was a year old, and Freud seems to have felt guilty about that. And sibling rivalry plays a big part in my book.
And I want to come to that, but I don't.
Thank you very much to the BBC for that programme. I should say that that is only a part of the discussion with Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. The whole piece is around 26 minutes, but I have only given you about 5.5 minutes. The radio host and Rabbi Jonathan Sacks were talking about what the attitude was like to religion around 25 years ago. There was a period about 25 years ago when the road to the future was secular. Secular meaning not religious, and liberal democracy and the market economy were about to conquer the world. It seems like people were no longer interested in religion. However, recently we can see that there has been a very strong revival of religious attitudes, especially of a certain kind. The radical kind we can see operating in the Middle East, in countries like Iraq and Syria, in the guise of ISIL. In the guise of ISIL. G-U-I-S-E. I'm sure you have heard of ISIL, the radical militant Islamic group who are wreaking violence throughout the area. Wreaking violence. W-R-E-A-K-I-N-G. In the discussion they say religion is making a comeback with a vengeance, thoroughly upsetting people who had thought religion was dead and that we now lived in a secular world. In the discussion they also said that some people think society is going in the wrong direction and this is giving rise to the conflict with religion. And furthermore, secular models don't give people a sense of who they are, meaning that without religion people feel a sense of confusion or loss of direction. Let's talk first of all about why 25 years ago or so people thought that religion was coming to an end, or that at the very least it was becoming far less important in society. I think there are three reasons for this. The first was that people didn't believe in religion anymore. The second was they didn't feel they needed religion. And the third was secular life was more fun. People were willing to abandon religion because they thought there was more fun to be had in a secular life. So why did religion begin to lose its credibility? I think here we have been observing a process of decreasing credibility for religion for a very long time, associated with the growth of scientific knowledge and rational thinking. Long ago in the past, when things were mysterious and suspicious, it was very easy to believe in religious ideas because they could not be disproved, and also they maybe provided some satisfying explanation for the phenomenon we observed around ourselves. Religious ideas would have enabled us to explain everything. Why the sun goes down at night, why the weather changes, why the crops fail, or why my wife won't get pregnant. But with the rise of science, people began to debunk religious ideas. Debunk. D-E-B-U-N-K. Science was able to give provable explanations for what we could observe, and hence science took the place of God in many situations. Science took the place of God. One very prominent example is Darwin's theory of evolution. When Darwin showed everyone that we were descended from a long line of other species, going back to some simple organism living millions of years ago, this really cast doubt upon many religious ideas which said that God was the creator of mankind, maybe in the form of Adam and Eve in the old Bible. But of course, when Darwin showed that we were descended from a kind of monkey, this puts this whole explanation in doubt. Why would God create man in such a convoluted way? Creating some simple organism similar to the bacteria we can see in ponds and other places, and then wait millions of years for this to develop into human beings. What a crazy strategy. And also, what is the status of all the other kinds of creatures on the earth? Do they have a soul? Do they have God's blessing? Why should we think we are special compared with other species when we can see that we are all evolved from the same simple organisms? I'm going to stop talking here and continue this discussion in my next video.